The sonnet Remember by the Victorian poet Christina Rossetti, although written in 1849, was not published until 1862, when it appeared in her first collection, Goblin Market and Other Poems. In it, her speaker addresses an unspecified lover and entreats him, in one final act of love, to remember her after she has died. When she has gone, the pair will be able to share neither the physical intimacy of holding hands, nor the emotional intimacy of planning for the future, of giving advice and of praying for one another. Communicative acts that are a demonstration of love between the living. As the poem develops, however, her tone shifts, and she acknowledges that, as the pain of grief becomes less raw, forgetting the loved one, even if only temporarily, is to be expected, and that, actually, she would not want him to feel guilty for this. The one memory that she wishes to remain with him as a trace of her existence after she is gone is that she has given him her blessing to move on and feel happiness rather than grief and guilt. Written from the perspective of a person contemplating their own death, this poem explores universal themes of love, memory, loss, and grief. Christina Rossetti was only 19 when she wrote this poem, and so it may appear melodramatically morbid to the modern reader, especially in one so young, but we mustn't forget that the Victorians were obsessed with death. They were surrounded by it, for one thing. Without the modern medicine we enjoy today, lifespans were, on average, half of what they are now. Infant mortality rates were sky high, and many people died at home, in front of family and friends who bore witness to these events with alarming regularity. It was also during the 19th century, triggered by Queen Victoria's loss of her own husband Prince Albert at a very young age, and her insistence on publicly mourning him for the next 40 years of her life, that elaborate funeral and mourning practices were invented. Furthermore, the year 1849 was a momentous one for Christina Rossetti. She had recently become engaged to the painter James Collinson, but was, at the same time, also seriously ill with depression. It's no wonder then, what with her own personal situation and the preoccupation with death that surrounded her, that her thoughts perhaps were somewhat morbid in nature. The poem follows the structure of a Petrarchan sonnet, named after the Italian poet who invented the form, Francesco Petrarca. It has 14 lines divided into an octave, 8 lines, made up of 2 quatrains, and a sestet, 6 lines, with a bass meter of iambic pentameter, di-dum, 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 di-dum. The meter is almost entirely regular, apart from 2 metrical inversions, where substitutions are made of a trochee, dum-di, for the regulation iam, di-dum, at lines 7 and 13, i.e., only remember me, you understand, and better by far you should forget and smile. Rossetti also modulates the rhythm through the use of enjambment, more concentrated in the latter half of the poem, and the caesura in the middle of line 7. The poem has a rhyme scheme of A, B, B, A, B, B, A, C, D, D, E, C, E. And all rhymes are single or masculine, in that the rhyme falls on the stressed final syllable of each line. Sonnets also usually have a volta, or turn, marking the end of the octave and the beginning of the sestet, between lines 8 and 9. Simply put, the octave usually presents a problem or a situation, while the sestet either comments on the problem or provides a solution or resolution. In the case of this sonnet, the problematic situation of the octave is that when the speaker dies, she and her lover will no longer be able to communicate directly to express their love, and her tone is one of quiet persistence as she directs him to remember her, reminding him that this is the only way they can remain connected. This solution, however, is also problematic, and at the volta her tone shifts, signalled by the adverb yet, as she calmly accepts that forgetting is a natural process and that she wouldn't want him to feel guilty for this. A better solution is that her legacy, instead, will be giving him her blessing to be able to move on. The poem is written in the second person, you, as Rossetti's speaker directly addresses and entreats her loved one. This gives the poem an intimate feel. She also uses a number of repetition techniques, such as anaphora, where a word or phrase is repeated at the beginning of successive clauses, i.e., remember me. Anadiplosis, where a word or phrase at the end of a clause is repeated at the beginning of the next, i.e., gone away, gone far away. And polyptoton, where the root of a word is repeated, i.e., turn and turning, which all add to the poem's feeling of solemnity and serve to emphasise key ideas. Rossetti's diction is reasonably straightforward and monosyllabic words predominate. Even though the Victorians were obsessed with death, they were also known for being restrained, prudish and genteel, so mentioning it explicitly would have been considered crass. So how did they talk about death without actually naming it? A euphemism is a mild or indirect word or expression that is substituted for one that is much harsher, and Rossetti uses a number of euphemisms for death in this poem, such as being gone away, as though on a journey to the silent land, where her lover will no longer be able to hold her by the hand. She also references her death as being darkness and corruption. These mild word choices serve to soften the subject matter and enhance the poem's tone of gentle entreaty. The poem's one-word title, remember, is the first word of the poem and is repeated 5 times throughout. It is the poem's key preoccupation, although there is a subtle shift in what Rossetti's speaker wishes her love to remember as the poem develops. The poem begins by addressing our almost universal desire to be kept in the hearts and minds of our loved ones after we have died. Remember me when I am gone away. Although remember me is in the imperative mood, its tone is softened by the regular iambic rhythm and by the fact that we are not yet aware that this departure to which she is referring is being used as a euphemism for death. Rossetti's meaning is clarified in the next line as she repeats the phrase using a technique known as anadiplosis, this time with the added modifier far and the metaphoric silent land, to emphasise that this is a one-way journey to a distant place where communication will no longer be possible. Gone far away into the silent land. The sibilant s of silent and the consonant l sounds in silent and land enhance this sense of stillness. She continues, when you can no more hold me by the hand, nor I half turn to go, yet turning stay. Here Rossetti's speaker reminds her lover that the closeness they enjoy here on earth will no longer be possible, and that she will have no choice over her departure. In a very few words, she conjures here an image of a couple who crave physical intimacy and who find it difficult to take their leave of one another. The alliterated, breathy, aspirated h sound of hold, hand and half, as well as the polyptotonic turn and turning, add to this sense of tenderness. The second quatrain begins, remember me when no more, day by day, you tell me of our future that you planned. The anaphora present in Remember Me When enhances Rossetti's speaker's tone of quiet persistence, as she reminds him that, when she has gone, they will no longer get to talk about their future shared lives together. The diacope in the phrase day by day emphasises how they are currently a constant presence in each other's life, but that this will, at some point, be no more. Note the repetition of this phrase from the previous quatrain to underscore that their life, as they know it now will necessarily come to an end. Note also that the use of the possessive pronoun our here is the only instance of a plural pronoun in the whole poem. The separation implied in the repeated use of I and me and you, rather than we, is a reminder that not only do we come into this life alone, but we also leave it alone. The colon at the end of the line indicates that she is now going to describe the implications of all this. Only remember me, she implores. The metrical inversion in the first foot, where we have a trochee, only, dumdy, rather than the regulation I am, not only disrupts the rhythm, which has been regular up to this point, but also emphasises that there is only one thing he can do to keep them connected and give her some form of life after death, and that is to remember her. The caesura created by the semicolon, and which also modulates the rhythm by metaphorically putting on the brakes, highlights the brevity and simplicity of this command. After all, she says, you understand it will be late to counsel then or pray. In other words, it will be too late for him to give her advice or pray for her. The volta at the beginning of the sestet, however, signals a change in mood. Note the adverb yet, which introduces it, indicating that, in spite of everything she has just said, there is something else to be considered. Yet, if you should forget me for a while and afterwards remember, do not grieve. In other words, the more she thinks about it, she imagines that after the rawness of grief has faded, there might come a time, however momentary, when he forgets her. If he then remembers her, he may be overcome with pain, sorrow, and guilt at this involuntary betrayal, and this is something that she absolutely does not want. And so she gently implores him, do not grieve. The use of another colon indicates that she is now going to explain why he should not. For if the darkness and corruption leave a vestige of the thoughts that once I had. The phrase darkness and corruption is another euphemism for her death, evoking perhaps the darkness that will descend over her as she loses her senses, while her body corrupts or rots away. A vestige is a trace or remnant of something that no longer exists. What she's saying here, then, is that if her death leaves him with the merest trace of what she used to think, then this should be the thought that she wants him to remember. Better by far you should forget and smile than that you should remember and be sad. Note the metrical inversion at the beginning of line 13, i.e. better, dumdy, which once more disrupts the rhythm and signals that this is in fact the central message of the sonnet. Note also the use of antithesis here with forget and smile and remember and be sad, which suggests that the act of remembering and the emotion of happiness are mutually exclusive. In other words, she concludes by giving him her blessing to move on and feel happiness once more after her death, even if that means that she is forgotten. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comments section below, and I'll do my best to answer them. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more videos on English language topics and exam techniques and English literature texts.